Hello, lovely community. I want to introduce you to Kimberly, my sweet wife, who has been a part of this channel in the background since its inception and is the number 2 person as far as effort that has gone into the Juggling Lessons channel. She's not usually on camera, and she's usually in support role. Today, she's going to fulfill that support role by reviewing a video that is a talk that I had with Richelle last Saturday. In the prior Saturday, Richelle and I spoke and talked about trans issues and did some role play. And I very specifically called out that a whole bunch of that was not SE practice. This was not SE recipe. I was going beyond the recipe by quite a bit and calling myself out while doing so. In this next one, I intended to stay within SE recipe in order to give the other example. The prior is the bad example, if you're following an SE recipe. And this one is a better example. Kimberly is going to watch the video. She hasn't seen it yet. Is going to watch the video, and she is permitted to interrupt anytime she likes and timestamp and record her comments in line. So note that she hasn't watched ahead. She may say things that are resolved immediately following, and you'll forgive that.
Hello.
Hi there.
We should be on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, and Twitter.
Oh my.
I only have a few
All the
subscribers.
places.
I don't have many subscribers, so I don't know how many people will actually. I do have Facebook friends, so maybe somebody from Facebook will pop in.
Sure. Hey, all the people, it doesn't really matter. We are agnostic as to how you're watching us. We're trying to just make it easy through all the tubes. Just put the manifold, open up all the valves, let the tubes, and you can see the thing on your tube.
Okay.
The thing you're that thing.
Do you have an opening statement?
Oh, yes. I am here to hear you out on a topic that you wanted to talk about and ask you for the reasons, maybe, and ask you for the reasons behind the reasons and figure out what kind of an argument you have. I'm going to try not to argue back from an alternate perspective. That would be the normal thing. However, I'm sure you're going to ask me my position on things, and I'm not going to be cagey. I'm just going to say my honest thing, and I'm not going to try to defend or argue for it much, but I also am willing to be transparent.
Okay. I have a list of questions for you.
Yes.
And I hope to have a good dialogue that remains civil and rational and logical.
Cool. I hope so.
Okay.
I'll try.
So while editing last week's video, I've watched it many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized there was a few things I didn't quite understand what you were saying, but I didn't know how to formulate a question at the time. So I just kind of moved on to the next topic. So there's a few things I want to come back and revisit. And the first one is, can you sum up what you said last week about what it means to be trans?
Sum up. Okay. Give me just a moment. Trans, as long as I'm using it in the term of transgender, not trans something else, which I totally would allow that use. It's just that when we say trans, I think we're referring to transgender. Refers to someone who's assigned at birth presentation, or maybe their physical presentation doesn't align with the gender they prefer to express, and they want to make that alignment and have you treat them in the gender that they would express. And trans is a label that people put on themselves, and I think that's subjective, and we should allow that. And I also think we should treat everybody the same, regardless of sex, regardless of gender, except in the areas where it's reasonable and we have to. But legally, we should have no distinctions about sex or gender written into our laws. because we just treat everybody kindly and the same. So trans is an example where it's really difficult to do that uh, because of these, crossing over people's prior boundaries and where the lines really get blurry and messed up. And so it's really pushing us to look at, well, wait a second. Why do we have these discriminations on public bathrooms? Why do we have a discrimination sign that discriminates this sex from this sex? Why can't we just have enough private bathrooms or private stalls with a common washing the hands space that you don't have to have a discrimination? You can simply say one human, one stall, and
Oh, I forgot to show
zip
the
your
banner.
pants up. Yeah, and zip up your pants before you come out, and the outside space is public non-naked space, and the naked space is in there with the lockia on it. That's it. That's what I want. And that way we don't have to write anything into the laws about it, and we can start treating everybody the same and ignore variations in their personal presentation that just make us feel uncomfortable in our pants if that's the case. I really just
You
talked a lot, so sorry. Thank you for that priming.
use the word gender.
Yeah.
It what do you mean by gender, and is it the same as that feminine masculine spectrum
Okay.
that we talked about last week?
When I was born, sex and gender meant the same thing. And it really referred to everything that we now want to distinguish. Some of us do want to distinguish into sex and gender. Sex, for me, is the part that's immutable, the part that we share with other animals, the part that is absolutely male in my male to female trans friends, or absolutely female in my female to male trans friends. Okay. That's the sex part. And then the gender part is the socially constructed bit where we associate pants with men and skirts with women, or uh, haircuts, or all the kind of things that we choose. Now, maybe these are uh, traits that naturally fall to one side, but then we socially start to associate with them and say, well, no, if you're doing the trait that fits the other presentation, you're doing something different. And now we call that gender. So gender is what I'm calling all of the socially malleable traits that we associate with sex, which includes behaviors, modes of dress, presentation, all the, is hair color in there? No, hair color is not associated with gender, but maybe it is in some cases. And if it
Maybe
were,
pink.
yeah, yeah. Is face makeup gender? In some cultures, yes. In some cultures, no. And so that would depend on whether you would say that's a gendered thing or not. Like having a beard is kind of a gendered thing in my society. So
Right.
I'm expressing a masculine gender by wearing a beard.
Okay. Next question is,
Yes.
what does it mean to feel inwardly feminine, masculine, or feel a gender?
Uh, I like a lot of my masculine behaviors. I like my deep voice. I like my grandfatherly tone when I can do that. Uh, I also like a lot of the ways in which I act femininely, and I don't want to try to act those out for you. This isn't something that's performative. The things that I recognize about myself that are nurturing and feminine and motherly and all those kinds of things, I nurture, I enjoy those things. I don't want to shut them out. When they're natural and emerge, I'm happy to adopt them. Uh, this is not me being trans. This is me just being like open to not locking myself into a stereotype. So, do I inwardly feel masculine? I've inwardly have. I want to water my feminine attributes that are useful in the world. So, yeah, I want to encourage feminine gender in myself, and I'm not looking to discourage masculine gender in myself.
I see her paying attention to her questions, but not necessarily your answers. She waits till you're done talking, but I'm not seeing any responsiveness to your answers.
Yeah, I noticed that I didn't get any direct indication that she was actually addressing anything I said other than just waiting to ask her next question.
Does that answer how does it mean to feel inwardly feminine, masculine, gender, or would you like me to try to speak from my reports from people who are way over on a scale from me?
Maybe.
Okay. So the reports that I have from my trans friends are that they very much, almost like dysphoria, like I used to feel about my weight, have a very negative self-image about, say, if I'm thinking of a male to female trans friends, uh, like a distinct dislike for some of their masculine traits and a real preference for complete replacement with feminine traits of those components, and feeling much happier when they're in that space, when they're expressing that side of themselves. So they would feel that inwardly, and then if they do get in a positive social and rewarding and psychological reward effect from it, then uh, I think that that would be them feeling it outwardly and putting that together.
Okay. Is the outward expression of feminine or masculine just a style choice or something deeper?
It's both. It's absolutely a style choice, but is my choice of beard and voice deeper? Uh, at some point, you could argue that my voice is biologically there, and I might be able to Michael Jackson myself out of using it, but it's innate, right? I would never not be a bass. I would just be a strangled one. Um, it is a style choice? Yes, it's very much a style choice uh, to express. Now, the why we express it, that might be the deeper part because we actually really function better when we're doing things. You know, some of the masculine traits that I dislike are uh, antisocial, and I dislike them for being antisocial, not because they're masculine. But if I replace them with a feminine trait, they can become more pro-social. It's kind of general. Sorry if I'm not being very specific, but maybe you can understand reasons why I might want to choose different behaviors that are not about gender, but do fall into this willingness to cross a gender line in order to express.
Yeah, it seems to be very much culturally dependent
Yeah,
because if our society had different culture norms, what it means to be feminine or masculine would be a lot different.
absolutely. Yeah. Look at kings of France and the King Louis of the whatever's numbers, and gender expression was flopped on its head in so many modern ways.
Mhm. Um, Last week, what I heard you say is that there's nothing wrong with trans people and
Right.
they don't need a cure.
Right.
If that's true, then why do they need medical care in the form of medical transition?
If somebody wants to change something about their body and they can do so with uh, acceptable risk profiles, which is to say, maybe the benefits of the change are not worse than not making the change, then I'm all in favor of them doing that. Um, some people might get augmentation surgery just to change their appearance, and fine. If you want to do that, I don't see it as I see it well within somebody's freedom. Whether I think that the risk benefit profile is good for me, yeah, I'm scared of surgery, so I don't want it. But you get what I'm saying. I certainly wouldn't want to restrict somebody doing augmentation surgery or plastic surgery on their face, or getting a tattoo, or rings or stretchings, whatever. That's their freedom. I want that to be their freedom. Why do they need medical care? Because those kind of surgeries are that kind of medical care. Now, there's an additional kind of thing, and that is if somebody's actually being like really messed up by something that they can't control. Now I need to give them medical care even if they can't afford it. If they've got something like somebody was born with a cleft lip and is needs some early surgery to get it fixed. I think you've seen these kinds of drives for that kind of money, and good on them. The point is, that's the kind of thing we as a society should prop up. If somebody has a need of something to really positively influence their life, sometimes we want to provide that as well. And where that line is totally a nuanced discussion. Right now, I don't need it all for trans to be on the public dole. I think it should be on the public dole as much as breast augmentation surgery for the same level. If you're willing to give somebody a boob job for it, fine, you can do trans work. And otherwise, it's on their dime. I'm okay with that. So should the government pay for medical transitions? Only in the case where they would have, like, for reconstructive surgery, like from an accident, like, or if there was some kind of an insurance coverage that would have covered it because of whatever, and the government's partially involved in that, fine. But I'm not concerned about the edge cases. I don't need it to be on the public dole that people would have elective surgery, and I'm fine with trans people only being able to call this elective surgery, with the exception of special cases, again, like somebody gets into an accident, needs reconstructive surgery. Is that elective or is that plastic and of another category? And we can argue about that. Please continue.
Okay. Before we go, well, I don't know if it's a separate topic or, I mean, it's related. The next thing I want to talk about is body dysmorphia and body dysphoria.
Yes.
But before we go to that, is there anything that you wanted to ask me or?
No, I wanna not dig on your stuff other than what you would try to bring in today, and keep it to the claims that you would make today. Otherwise, it becomes like referencing for the audience stuff that they're not listening to in the moment.
I think I agree with everything you said so far.
Oh, good. Wow. Thank you.
This isn't the attitude she had last time.
You might see it come back.
Okay. Okay. So my question is too long for the banner, so I'm gonna have to read it.
Yes, please.
It's a quote from Wikipedia, so it's a little bit long.
Wikipedia. Wisdom of the crowd. Lay it on me.
As we touched on last week, body dysphoria is having a bad feeling about your body and isn't necessarily a mental disorder. Body dysmorphia, however, is a mental disorder characterized by the obsessive idea that some aspect of one's own body part or appearance is severely flawed and therefore warrants exceptional measures to hide or fix it. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is talk therapy that helps the patient think of in a more helpful way, is recommended. For many people with body dysphoria, cosmetic surgery does not work to alleviate the symptoms, as their opinion of their appearance is not grounded in reality. It is recommended that cosmetic surgeons and psychiatrists work together in order to screen surgery patients to see if they have body dysmorphia, as the results of the surgery could be harmful to them. Why should we treat trans people that have body dysmorphia in regards to their sex/gender any differently than any other type of body dysmorphia?
Okay. Good. Thank you. If I ignore the last question and I look just everything that came before I said why, I think that fits exactly with my understanding. I do really respect the nuance in that tone, that one of them is the normal, healthy coping, the reasonable, rational, proportional response, and one of them is a diluted, unproportional response, an overreaction, a misfiring. And in the case of that misfiring, you're saying that intervention has a low success rate. Yes. And I really hope that these kinds of things are in place regards transitioning. And my experience from my transitioning friends is that this is in place, even to the point of being a barrier, a checkbox that you have to really, really prove more than it almost seems like you prove it and then you prove it again and then you prove it for 6 more months and then you jump through a hoops and you get 6 other people to sign off, because it really seems like that it's been steep. Now, that's over 3 decades, okay, and it has gotten less so now, and I'm not well tuned into what it would be this year. So now the question, why? Could you give me that last question, the one that started with why?
why should we treat trans people that have body dysmorphia
Ah,
in regards to their sex/gender any differently than any other type of body dysmorphia?
right. I hope that we would not. I hope that we would treat all dysmorphia and dysphoria and go through the adult, careful, nuanced process of analysis with them to help them find out whether this is or isn't that thing. And then eventually leave it to their freedom, because our second guessing is no longer um, good enough reason in my mind to stop somebody getting a boob job, even if you think it'll make them look ugly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And would you say that some trans people have body dysphoria and some have body dysmorphia, and maybe some don't have either? Or is one of
That's a
those
good point.
required to be trans?
Uh, the as far as some don't have either, I would think that's the minority situation, and maybe they don't have after something something, and that might not have been medical. That might have been, and I lost enough weight, and then I don't know. Uh, the 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 sorry, the idea that they would have one or the other and not both. I see them as an overlapping set. You have to have one, and then if you have dysmorphia, it's because you have some that's in a disproportionate lobe. So I don't think you could have dysmorphia without having dysphoria, but I think you could have dysphoria without having dysmorphia, and I think you could have not dysphoria in whatever state. And I also don't need that somebody have dysphoria in order to be trans. I don't need their reason. It's their freedom. I
Okay.
don't need a reason in order to trigger my empathy and my willingness to just cooperate with whatever anybody wants to do in their own expression.
Okay. Would you allow other types of body dysphoria sufferers to harm their physical healthy body?
Yes, absolutely. If somebody really, really dislikes the shape of their earlobes and wants to have them amputated, yes, by all means. If somebody has ugly parts of their body they want removed, changed, whatever, enhanced, yes, go right ahead. Obviously, all appropriate limits that apply to like surgical ethics and all that kind of thing apply. And then, yes, go ahead. Cosmetic yourself into what I would would re- revolt from. This is in the sense of freedom means putting up with some stuff I really hate, and I only see any harm in this case being borne as a risk to the individual and not to anybody else. So their freedom to swing their fist even off the end of their arm is not restricted in my mind.
So that would include like the woman who wanted to blind herself or someone who wants to amputate a healthy limb.
Yes, those are extreme cases in which I do want to allow that freedom. It's weird to me, but it becomes down to that's an edge case that says, how much am I willing to stand by and allow something that is grotesque to me and revulsive and disgusting to me for someone else to do? And then I go to, well, I'm in favor of assisted suicide, so where am I going to draw the line shy of that? So no, yes, they're allowed.
Okay, that's logically consistent.
It's that catch-22. If you're crazy, then you're too crazy to consent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
I hate that argument.
okay.
You're too broken to say yes to this. And if you say yes to this, it proves you're broken.
So come back and tell us how well I did in terms of responding to this.
Are trans adults capable of consenting, or does the fact that they want to change themselves by definition mean that they are not of sound mind?
I don't like the equivocation of saying that people who are not of your version of sound mind are incapable of consent. That is defining their consent out of existence and saying that it doesn't matter, that it's of zero weight. And I would say that their consent is extremely important. If you went against their consent, that would be a felony. So their consent is terribly important. And now, sometimes, due to age or mental incapacity, we decide that someone's consent is not sufficient. It is necessary, but it is not a sufficient condition. They also need other caretakers to sign off and make an agreement. But the caretaker doesn't get to override the person's consent. Please do not binary this question of consent. You still have to have it, even if you're not going to recognize it as sufficient in whichever category. Have I addressed the question sufficiently?
Okay, well done. You got the consent.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this would be an area of disagreement between us,
Cool.
because I would be against suicide,
Okay.
assisted suicide, or letting someone that you know is
Good
suicidal
question.
to do it themselves, because I would say that by definition, if you want to harm yourself, that you aren't of sound mind, and that somebody, hopefully next of kin and not the government, would be justified in using minimum necessary force to protect them from themselves and take guardianship over them like a parent does a child,
Mhm.
until they are of sound mind again and are able to resume
What
taking care
you've
of
got is
themselves.
already a standard in my society, and it is actually enforced by the state. You're saying it should be enforced by someone less than the state. I'm fine if somebody who's professional gets in the way so the state doesn't have to. That seems like a much better situation a lot of the time. And at this point, I don't have enough of an argument with the outcomes that situation has that I want to fight for that line to move, even though ideologically my trolley problem kind of thing doesn't align with that. And I would vote for things like moving toward more like the Oregon level of assisted suicide. If California had that to vote, I'd vote for it. But it's not something I want to campaign for much. It's not an important issue for me.
Okay. You touched on this a little bit earlier when you said that you don't want the government to pay for it, which I was happy to hear.
Yep.
But what about the cost of medical care to society? We heard this argument during the pandemic that if you get sick, even if you're paying for your own healthcare, you're taking a hospital bed from somebody else. And the more pressure we put on the medical system, the less care there is for everyone.
The more
So,
the more elective surgery that there is, that's actually a benefit to the medical system, not a cost, because elective surgeries are moved when they're not busy. You can't get your elective surgery if we're in the middle of a crunch. Okay. Next, so it uses available spare capacity. Additionally, it pays very well for that available spare capacity, and therefore actually makes the rest of your medical care cheaper. So, by all means, elective stuff, that's just commerce. Please, more of that, especially that which doesn't pinch our emergency responder capability.
I would say that the root cause with the problem with the cost of medical care is that the government artificially lowers the number of doctors that can be trained each year.
This is the first I've heard of this.
That doctors are artificially reduced by the government in order to raise medical care costs?
Yes.
What's your confidence on that claim?
Low.
Mine is extremely low.
Yeah.
I think my evidence is all of the money that is spent to prop up medical schools and promote the education of medicine and the grants, for example, that my other wife Naya got to become a medical coder from the government.
Maybe she's talking about they're only paying for a certain amount, so they're limiting how many doctors.
It's completely backwards to the answer. If you're saying that they are artificially reducing it, no, they are artificially inflating it.
Yeah.
And I have plenty of evidence to that end. So it's a daft, I say, argument.
A lot of these knock-on effects would be solved. Next question. Why is it so important for trans people to use the women's bathroom?
Why is it so important that you have a women's bathroom? Just have a people's bathroom. Stop trying to divide people and make a picket fence and pick a fight in the middle of something where somebody's trying to pee, okay? Please give us bathrooms for individuals and stop trying to check what's in their pants before they're allowed to pee.
The reason why women want women-only bathrooms is because it's a vulnerable feeling place, and it's nice to have a space, whether it be a bathroom, locker room. It's more important in the locker room, a changing room, where there's an expectation that you're not going to have a male in there. And there's been cases of men hiding
Hold
cameras.
on. Let's not go to men hiding cameras. That's not a trans question. That's people being abusive and doing illegal things that you're afraid of. If you go to the store and you're trying on clothes, they never ask you to do it in public in front of people. They give you a private booth. Same thing in a locker room, same thing everywhere else where you want to show off your bits. Make it easy to not show off your bits. Okay? That's all we got to do. And then we don't care what are your bits. No privacy concerns. And if there's only one person in there, you can't be attacked. I don't need to have men's and women's dressing rooms. I just need dressing rooms.
Well, women would prefer to have women-only dressing rooms. Most women.
But if they're private, who cares?
Oh, we care.
I don't care about you care. That's not legal. You're setting up a discrimination because of your preference, and you can't give me any good reason why you want to enforce that discrimination.
If you don't care about our
Good
preferences,
reason is
why
one
should
that
we care
moves me.
about?
Obviously, that's subjective. So, sorry, I'm setting up my own standard for what's a good reason. Please continue.
If you don't care about our preferences, why should we care about the preferences of trans people?
Because they're humans.
I'm actually cutting in here, and maybe you'll talk, but that's the end of my argument. You might notice that there's a few minutes left. That's the end of my argument. I'll replay that at the end so that you understand what it is she's referring to for the next several minutes of insulting screed.
We're humans too. And single occupancy bathrooms are actually more dangerous because a woman can be caught off alone in there, while the situation with the stalls, it's safer. The less privacy, it's actually safer because there are more likely to be other people in there and to hear and to be able to see what's going on. And the way that the bathrooms are designed right now is for a reason. And we would, a lot of us, I mean, I can't speak for all women, a lot of us would prefer to keep it that way. And it's just curious that our preferences aren't accounted for, but we're supposed to account for the preferences of trans people, even though we can't even get an answer for why is this so important. Why does it elicit such an emotional response that suggests that females should be allowed to have female-only spaces?
You tell me. Why do you think people are pissed off at you? Have you not
I
understood
think
so far?
Because trans people, well, they use this term gender euphoria. They feel gender euphoria when their gender is affirmed by
Yep.
other people, and they
Yep.
feel gender dysphoria when it's not. And so
I feel
for
the euphoria
using.
part. I don't feel the dysphoria part. I feel euphoria when people recognize feminine components of me and praise them. I don't feel a dysphoria about the masculine parts, so I'm only a little in that. Please continue.
And so I think that that's why they get so upset when they're not welcome into women's spaces, because it's much more than comfort and safety for them. There's this other component of having their gender affirmed. Would you say that's true?
Oh, I don't actually even care to comment on your opinion about other people's motivations that are in your outgroup. I don't think that you are even close to proportional or correct, and nor do I think that you should even try to speak for them. I think you should ask them and quote them. I think
I'd
you're
be
out of
happy to
line.
have.
I think you're out of line to cast on their motivations, especially if it's for justification for your own argument.
You asked me.
Sorry, what?
You asked me why I think they care so much.
Did I? No, I think you asked me.
I asked you,
Huh?
and in response, you asked me,
Oh, okay.
and I
Well,
answered.
okay. I guess I'm just not. I'm completely unmoved by a reason that involves your casting a generalized impression of the motivations of a group that's your outgroup. That any answer that includes that just falls flat with me.
I'd be happy to talk to a trans person.
I'll perhaps arrange that. I'll find one that feels brave enough.
Okay.
Maybe let them opt in.
Do you think that privately owned businesses that are open to the public should have a right to decide what their policies are on their property?
Only within the laws of the land.
So I'm not asking about what the laws are. Like, pretend like
Oh,
we
then
don't
no.
have any
If
laws.
you're going to say not within the laws of the land, then absolutely not, because I think there's a huge number of laws of the land that I want to apply on every property where I am permitted to go as a public wandering pedestrian. Okay, I want certain level of protections and baselines, and that book is thicker than I care to read, so it is a non-trivial list. And essentially, those are the laws of the land. Now, if you want to start being selective and say, oh, but no, we should have the right to violate the law of the land, my answer is simply no. Vote. See if you want to change it.
Okay, I'm asking you like what you would prefer the law of the land to be. Like, if you could make
I
the
want
law of
I
the
want to
land
restrict
anything you want.
property owners from doing discriminatory things, even more than they are right now. The trend of the last 20 or 30 years, I'd like to snap about 15 years into the future and see how much we like that one.
So you're not against property owners having any rules on their property. You're just that you want there to be limits on the
I
government
want to
should
have a
put
national
limits.
discussion on what those laws should be and local discussions on what those laws should be. And we have a forum for that. And we have voting and we have a process for that. I don't need to deal with your Mott or your Bailey or your extreme argument or your all or your nothing. I've given a nuanced answer. And the answer is whichever extreme you're saying is, well, no, I gave the nuanced answer.
I can tell you've lost patience for this argument.
Good. I'm glad I communicated that clearly.
I'm
I wanted
surprised
to
you haven't
say,
hung up.
oh, I will.
Okay.
But I'm intentionally holding what I call tone 4 and not escalating past that and moving toward a graceful dismount. And I want to give her the very clear adult feedback that her arguments
Are not
are
compelling.
absolutely not compelling.
They're not getting
And
to you.
why?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to do the adult thing here and not escalate. And that proper thing is speak gracefully and clearly and dismount. Anyway, that was my intention. We'll see what happens.
Okay. If in your ideal society with the laws that you would prefer, if store security
Hold on.
have
I was not prepared to come up with my best possible world alternative. I'm working from the chess puzzle of today. I'm willing to engage that, but not at this moment's notice. This would take 20 minutes of me thinking first. You're asking for my ideal world where
Well,
I get
okay,
to
like,
change everything and write it? I'm a fiction writer. You're asking for me to, maybe spend a year world building to work that out.
well, okay, let's imagine there's a referendum on just this issue. What would you vote for?
Oh, okay.
Um,
So there's an issue, a voting issue. Great. I love that hypothetical. It's small enough I can get it in a box. Go for it, please. Play it
okay.
out.
If store security have a policy of allowing obvious males in the women's locker room, changing room, do you think that might have adverse results for women's safety? Oh, wait, I thought this was the other question.
Oh,
Wait,
sorry.
okay.
My answer is simply I want to avoid having businesses have places where people are encouraged to get nude together, except for where that's specifically like their own. Like, okay, if I go rent a private hot tub space for a party, I get to decide who gets to come to the party. That's my own discrimination, and because I rented it. Okay, we're fine, right? I get to choose who gets in the room by my own rules, and it doesn't matter what my rules are. Do we agree? And then
Hmm.
I am not actually ever expected to go get naked in front of somebody who I'm not in the party with. Okay? That's what I want. That no pressure to ever get naked in front of somebody who I'm not in their party with and not in their space. Just don't set that up. Stop with this. Stop with this trying to sort people at the door for their safety. It's sexist bullshit, assuming that because what if somebody's got in their pants is a strong indicator of whether or not they're going to commit a felony.
You've stopped holding it in.
Am I still in tone? Tell me at the end.
You're solving the wrong problem.
So you can't imagine adverse results for women's safety?
I'm not okay with the idea of this women's locker room thing to begin with. So you're asking me what's my policy? What am I voting for? Stop having places like that. And then you don't have to try to sort people by the bits that they're supposed to keep secret by law.
Okay. So this is a question that I thought it was. Should it be illegal? And what should the punishment be for a business owner that doesn't allow males to use the women's spaces?
See prior answer. I've addressed this. You keep picking on something that I'm past. I have a different solution that I want. And I don't like your nitpicking back here on something that I say is a problem that's not mostly about trans. It's about human rights in general. I want to solve the human
You,
rights in general problem. I
you
don't want
think
to try
it's
to dice people up by what they're supposed to keep secret in public.
you think it's a human rights issue to
Yeah.
have a women's locker room?
I think it's a human rights issue to not have to get naked in front of other people.
Nobody has to.
Right. So stop having those.
What if people want to?
Then go ahead and make it your private club. Don't make it open to the public.
Can you define? I was confused about this last week. Can you explain what you mean by a private club?
Yeah, if I go rent a hot tub room for a party, that's my private club. I get to decide who gets to come to the party, and because I'm the host, I got to do that. Now, if I start putting up banners and posters and say, "Come to my party," now I'm not allowed to say, "Come to my party," as long as you are redheaded and blue-eyed. Okay, people should give
So
me
the
the side eye.
so the difference is advertising.
If I'm inviting the public versus individually inviting my friends, that's the difference between private and public. And
Okay.
if
So
you're doing business with the public, you are necessarily in the inviting the public category, and now that's the set of rules under which you have to follow.
okay. So imagine a gym opens up and they have a women's locker room and they say males are not allowed to go into this women's locker room. What punishment do you think that they should have?
I'm done. You've hit me up. Now we've gone more than 3 times you've asked this question. Please move on. I've answered it as much as I'm going to talk about it.
I guess I'm kind of confused because you said you want it to be illegal.
Did you hear me say that it should be illegal to have people come into those spaces?
Nope.
No, I think it should be illegal to have the discrimination. I think she's equivocating. I think she's putting words into my mouth. I think that's flagrantly dishonest. And if she doesn't understand that, seriously.
But all laws have to have punishments, so we need to know what the punishment should be. And I would say it's a violation of our rights and our property rights and our freedom of association and all of our rights to tell us that it should be illegal to have women-only spaces if we're
Thank you
inviting
for this
the public.
conversation. I've enjoyed it. I would like to terminate it now. I think we are no longer making any progress toward understanding, and now I believe you're badgering me on a question, which I'm saying I want to move past. So,
I
thanks.
wasn't asking you a
Do you
question. I
have
was telling you
any?
my
Do you
opinion.
have any summary? I'm demonstrating a graceful rapport exit. This is me leaving and giving you the last word. Do you have any summary that you'd like to leave with your audience that I'll not get in the way of?
I think this is an excellent demonstration of how the trans ideology makes no sense and doesn't actually believe in freedom at all, and is about oppression of women, and is fundamentally sexist and bigoted at its core. And it's fundamentally hating of women and putting the needs of males who want to be seen as women above the safety and comfort of real women.
Thank you for making your case so clearly.
Thanks for coming on.
See you later.
Bye.
And at the end, step in.
Oh, I wish you had Naya here to see that. She would have choice comments, but
you can invite it, and I'll add them in if she chooses. Naya is my other wife. We also have another husband. We are a poly family of 4.
you kept it all together completely.
Well, thank you.
You safely dismounted. I thought you were going to get rougher.
Oh, good. I modeled it. I modeled a good dismount.
Mm-hmm. I've never seen you as the interlocutor before.
Oh, that's a jargon term. That means the person responding to the questions in this case, the claimant or the receiver of the interview.
Subject.
The subject of the
Main
interview.
subject.
Main subject of the interview, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a rare place for somebody who's usually doing the interviews, and yet you can still use SE as in that role. It not exactly as the recipe, but you can use the SE tools. Anything else? Thanks. So I'm going to end this replaying the core of my argument. Good night.
If you don't care about our preferences, why should we care about the preferences of trans people?
Because they're humans.